Welcome, Unprofessionals, to another episode of Unprofessional Development. I'm Tudisco.
And I'm Mealy.
And today, for the first time, I'm outnumbered.
We've got three math teachers in the house. So we've got myself.
Three math teachers. This was my nightmare in middle school.
Well, I mean.
All right.
We've got John and Kyle from the podcast Making Math Moments That Matter, and also their websites, which I'll link. I'm trying to think. One is Somebody is a Geek, and the other one is Sparking Curiosity. I'm close. Or on there.
Tapping into Teen Minds.
Yeah, Tapping into Teen Minds.
Site is
That's
Tapping
what it
into
is.
Teen Minds.
There's you guys have
You know
a
what
lot
the
of,
problem is? We got too many sites going. It's kind of hard to keep track of them all.
You do, and you have a
Yeah.
lot of catchphrases and stuff like that.
We like alliteration. It's,
Yes.
How are you guys doing today?
We are great.
Yeah.
It's a fabulous COVID-19 kind of morning, and it snowed here last night, which seems unheard of. Like it just piled on the last 24 hours, and
like enough where you have
kind of all melted away. But
okay,
it's middle of April, usually down south here in Canada South, you know.
Let's say.
We're somewhat more tropical than, say, getting snow in April. So usually we're past that point and our grass is growing.
John's really stretching it today. More tropical than the rest of Canada.
Definitely trying to sell Canada here.
Not sure you know the definition of tropical.
On a map, we're only like a foot away from the tropics. But
it's just ukuleles.
In real life, it's a little longer.
Luau's and moose and syrup.
Yeah.
Yes. So no shoveling is necessary or getting out the snowblower or anything like that.
Yeah, I shoveled once all year, so that's the type of snow that we usually get around here. But
okay.
Being so close to the tropics, I mean, you wouldn't expect that you'd be shoveling that much, but
yes. Alrighty, so I want to get into a couple of little things to kind of like get to know you a little bit more on who you're about. We mentioned the podcast and the websites, and links to that in the show notes will be going on and all that kind of stuff. So kind of walk us through the journey from being a student to a teacher to being advocates, and we're kind of not going to spend a ton of time on it, but we're going to kind of get into, for lack of a better word, your philosophy, what it is that you feel about learning. And I know it's math specific, but I think that it really applies to a lot of other teaching practices as well across the board. Kind of walk through either individually or together how you guys came to be from little bitty lads to like super education podcaster webinar guys.
Gurus.
Going from our own math experience all the way till now, we'll probably be at the end of the COVID quarantine here, social distancing by the time we're done. So we'll do our best to keep it short. Yeah. But myself, and I know you'll hear some of these ideas echoed in John's story. I went through school. I was kind of that, I would say, average kid. Or I shouldn't say average kid. Average to me, through my own eyes, where I had average grades, and I just pushed enough to get that grade that my parents would be happy with. So I can definitely relate to that student. Many of us know that student where they've got a lot there, but there's a lot left in the tank. They don't put that extra effort in. No. I didn't see the value in doing that. For me, it was sort of like very, hey, my parents want an 80. I'm going to get them the 80. And when I didn't get the 80, then I always had somebody else to blame for it, right? Instead of myself. Going through school, I thought, I was getting a computer science degree and a math double major. And midway through that, I'd always been thinking about teaching. And I decided midway through university that I'm definitely going to teach, and I want to teach math. So I dropped the computer major. And off we went. But the big problem that I had was I was like most other math teachers in my philosophy. Very fixed mindset, there's some people who are good at math and there's some people who aren't, which we know from research is not true. And I got into the classroom and that's the way I taught for many years, was very procedurally. I didn't necessarily understand the math that I was doing. And in university, I actually had a professor when I was about to fail a course. called me into his office during office hours, and he looked me in the face and right in the eyes and said, you don't know anything about math. You don't belong here.
Wow.
That was his line to me. And
awesome.
It blew my mind. Now, you would think that would be like, maybe turning point. But no, I just thought he was a jerk. And I,
he was a jerk.
And I didn't learn anything from that experience until about 5, 6, 7 years teaching in the classroom, spinning my tires, working really hard. Like I was really hardworking. I wanted to figure this thing out. And many people would say that I was a good math teacher because I was nice to kids. I tried hard. I stayed in at lunch to help, those types of things. And I would say all math teachers are like that. They want the best for their kids, but I wasn't getting to those students in the middle and the students at the bottom. And that's when I was lucky enough to go to a conference and see this thing called 3-Act Math that Dan Meyer was pitching. And it just blew my mind. And from that day forward, I was like, this is there's something to this. And I knew I wanted to dig into it. Here we are, a number of years later, and we're still learning. We're still trying to figure this thing out alongside so many what we call math moment makers in the community. And luckily along that path, John was in a very similar stage.
I have a very, very similar story to Kyle. And I think a lot of teachers do that we were good in math in school, mostly because we were memorizers and could get by. I have a unique spin on my experiences. My father is a math teacher or was a math teacher, and I could see that life, like the teacher life. It's not that bad. And you get summers off and all this great stuff that you can come home at 3 o'clock, and that's running through my mind. And I hummed and hawed about becoming a teacher. And it was some experiences with tutoring college kids that kind of flipped the switch for me to go, okay, I think I'm going to go into this field. And once I did, I was, like Kyle said, I was that traditional teacher. And I think a lot of us definitely are, because we've never really experienced anything different. You mimic the teachers that you really enjoyed, or you do the opposite
of the teacher you hated.
Right? It's like, I got to teach math differently. And I was a teacher where so traditional that we have, tracking here in Ontario, and we call it streaming our pathways. And I was always teaching our grade 9 applied math path, and it's just kids that are going to maybe go to college or just directly to the workplace, not like college, like a community college in the United States, whereas it's a smaller college, like a 2-year, 3-year program kind of college. Just
to get clarity on that, you guys have 2 tiers, 3 tiers. Like, how many levels are there?
Usually
and
about
what
3.
level was that? 3.
Yeah,
And that was the middle one or the bottom one?
The middle one is the one that I'm referring to. And so it's kids that are like, they're decent, but mostly their experience has been told that they're bad at math throughout their career. And so they're not in the track to go off to, say, a 4-year university program.
Right.
And so a lot of them hate math. And I was teaching those for 10 years, year after year, because, you're told by your department head that you have to put in your dues. You can't teach those other classes until you put in time in these other classes. And I was pulling my hair out because I was that traditional teacher. I was teaching every year the same year. And I've used this phrase before, and I'm not sure exactly where I heard it, but I always consider now, was I teaching for 10 years or was I teaching 1 year 10 times?
Yeah.
And because I never modified. I'd write a lesson plan, and I would say, there we go, we're done. I've put that in my binder, and it's good for next year.
Nicely in the binder.
Yeah,
yes.
Once that whole lesson's done, that course is set, and I never have to do anything else. And I didn't take into account who is sitting in front of me, and because of that, I ended up hating teaching that class. And just
out of curiosity, did you actually have the answers to some of the worksheets memorized? Like, okay, number 13 is this.
They think you're a magician.
Yeah,
right.
Like, how do you know?
Sure,
this is the one that's the decimal.
We walk
the rest
around
of the whole
sheets.
numbers.
I would just go, yep. And kids would throw their hands up, and they're like, how does he even know that's right so fast? And it's just because I knew.
I laugh about it, and so many math teachers might get this joke. Like, how long has that kid been jumping off that cliff in Acapulco for quadratics? Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Sure, yeah. And
that's to make the math real, right? Real. Yes. Jumping off cliffs in Acapulco. You would never jump off a cliff close to home. You got to be closer to the tropics.
To the tropics, like you guys.
Yeah.
Can I ask you guys just a quick sort of question, just a clarification? You guys keep saying I was a traditional teacher.
Yeah.
Can you guys just quickly define exactly what you mean when you say that?
Yeah. For me, a traditional teacher, I imagine my father, and he would, in a math class, your desks are in rows. You would come in and you have the math script. Like, this is in the handbook when you become a math teacher, by the way. So it's like job number one is you must take up the homework, right? Like, it's like, get it homework out. We're going to take it up. We're going to go through the answers. Somebody might put it on the board. You might put it on the board, but it was like, check off, done.
And you plan for 10 minutes and it would take you 45 every single day. It's like, no matter what, true. After 10 years, you're like, I'm going to plan 10 minutes of homework take up. And then you'd always run out for your lesson. And you're like, how have I not learned this by now that this never happens?
Yeah. And I would then budget, the next 30 minutes of class. We were usually an hour 15-minute classes, and of here is the lesson. I'm going to write notes on the board. I'm going to do examples for you. You're going to copy them down. I'm going to walk through those examples so that those examples are going to look exactly like the homework questions.
Maybe you'll pitch out a couple easy ones for the kids so you feel like they're doing the example with you. Like it's and 7 plus 4, 7 plus 4, Tommy.
11.
Tommy.
Yeah.
Excellent. Yeah. Thank you, Tommy.
Thank you,
Tommy. And now I feel like we've done this collaboratively, right?
We had some engagement. Yeah.
Yes.
And then and there was always that time where the kids would come back in after you've done this traditional lesson that what did everyone get number 8? No one's getting number 8. And it's like, Mr. Orr, it's because you didn't do an example like that yesterday. And I don't know how to do it. You didn't teach us. It's not fair. And so I never really made kids think, and I think that's where Kyle and I started to make shifts, is in that traditional lesson, which I did for many, many years. And, we're not saying that there's nothing wrong with that, but I did that every single day. And I think when there's times where you want kids to think more, because I was doing all the thinking in class when I was delivering lessons that way, and they were doing none of the thinking. Like we've made that modification to say,
let me ask you,
doing the thinking?
Can we pause right there and ask you a question? Because, and I think, and I don't want to use the word trap or whatever, but you might say that the teachers fall into the trap of teaching that way, is because 99% of high school math and lower levels as well can be algorithmic, as opposed to history or English, where you might have to interpret something, or art, obviously, where you might have to interpret something. And obviously you can make art algorithmic as well for certain things. You can teach them how to draw faces and draw the lines and all that kind of stuff. But there is that natural, okay, this is how you complete the square. This is how you do the quadratic formula.
That's
this is how you
we use all the
differentiate.
time.
And all those things are very algorithmic. And so it's like, if I can teach these kids a recipe, they'll know the recipe, they'll be able to repeat the recipe, and then they'll be able to do that. And I don't know if you guys have used this analogy. I use it with my kids when I'm trying to teach them differently, is there's a difference between being a cook and a chef. And a cook can take the ingredients, and they know how to make the exact same dish for the restaurant all the time. They can make that pasta primavera because they know the pasta cooks this long. You use this much cheese, blah 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 blah, and this is how you do it. But a chef can go on Chopped and get 4 ingredients that they've never used before, and go, I understand how ingredients work. I understand things about flavors and cooking time and temperature and all that kind of stuff. And now I can modify, and I can solve this problem here given unique circumstances. Does that make sense?
That analogy.
That's good.
Yeah. And just to extend that, I love the analogy. And so imagine that cook who's really good at cooking pasta primavera. Now they have unfortunately moved or maybe lost their job. They've gone to another restaurant, and it happens to not be an Italian restaurant. Now I got to start from scratch again. And that's the way I feel we teach so many of our students in math classes. We teach them, so completing the square. When's the last time you've completed the square outside of that one course that it comes up in? And there's so much I'm using the word beauty, and I know some people maybe roll their eyes about it, but do we really care about them knowing the recipe to these abstract math concepts, or would we much rather give them an opportunity to investigate it, to understand how it works, why it works, just like that chef does. That chef understands how those ingredients work and which ones blend well and which ones don't. And that chef could then leave the Italian restaurant, go to a different restaurant and go like, I got this. I know where to go from here, and I can actually use some problem solving, some critical thinking skills. And that's where, we were talking before we went live. That's where I see a lot with what John and I are doing with the Make Math Moments framework. I see it as we always look at it through a specific math lens, but really it aligns really well with 21st century competencies, right? Like we're trying to get kids math experiences to become more fluent, more flexible with numbers. Mm-hmm. Even myself, I had no strategies, no number sense strategies beyond doing algorithms in my head. And that only takes you so far. And if you're lucky enough to have a really vast working memory, right? Like if you're a good memorizer, it's likely you could probably do some, relatively tricky algorithms in your head. Mm-hmm. But now I see the other side where if I understand how math develops, and that's the part where I think we really struggle in middle school and in high school, is that I never understood why completing the square worked. And that fundamentally is an issue because I can't help my kids bump into that learning if I never received that learning. Mm-hmm. And this is not a knock on teachers. It's that we went through that system. We were taught the recipes and I had the recipes and that's it. I couldn't help them become chefs like you were describing. And I think for us, that's where we've really shifted is what do you want your kids to have 5 years from now after they've left your math class? So even if you're a grade 3 teacher, a grade 8 teacher, a grade 10 teacher, a grade 12 teacher, if you bump into a student 5 years from now, what are you hoping they say? Are you hoping that they can ramble off the quadratic formula to you with no understanding? Or is there something else there? And we've never had anyone say quadratic formula. Nobody says it, but yet John and I always reference at the end, we only seem to care about those things, though. And that's why John and I essentially do what we do. We're trying to help people cut down the time it took John and I, because we were spinning our wheels for years, for multiple decades combined between the two of us. And we want to help people, cut out some of that, pulling out your hair. Because if you look at John's hairline, look at mine. Mine's even worse. You could tell we've been pulling out our hair for a long time.
So now we come to we've had the rising action and we've gotten to the conflict, right? So what? Just throw a little English in there for you, Tudisco, okay?
Thanks.
You're welcome.
It makes sense.
It's the hero's journey.
Yes. So now we want to know, as I'm sure the listeners are like, well, if we don't teach them like that, then what do I do? So give us the elevator pitch on what the alternative is.
Yeah. So what we have been doing for the last number of years is like Kyle said, putting our heads together and thinking about what is the lessons that we've had that were successful and what are the lessons that we had that weren't and what is it really about them. And Kyle mentioned 3-act math tasks and we had a lot of success with getting kids to think first and engagement and discussion happening in our classroom. And we said, is it because we put a video up of some scenario and asked kids to notice and wonder? Like, is it the video itself? And we've realized, we had a lot of engagement because kids were seeing a video and that was new in math class. But we realized later that there are many more underlying things that are getting our kids involved. And we kind of put our this idea of a 3-part framework, which is not really a 3-part lesson. It's 3 big ideas that we think that need to be considered when designing lessons. So we got a little bit of flair to this the 3-part framework with we call it Spark, Fuel, and Ignite. And we want to first talk about sparking curiosity. And when I was in Teachers College, this is not a new idea. We always wanted to hook kids into learning. And how can we spark engagement? How can we get that curiosity going? Because if you can get kids curious about math, then the rest become very, very easy for you to do. And most times in our traditional lesson, we were not sparking that curiosity.
Right.
No, we want to drive that questioning so that they go, I kind of want to know what's next. I want to know what the answer is here. So we got to spark curiosity. And Kyle, why don't you jump in and talk about what the next step is about fueling sense making?
Yeah, fueling sense making is one where John and I think spent the majority when we were on this. We had these epiphanies, and we were like, wow, Dan Meyer really We constantly are tipping our cap to him because he, for us, was, or I should say for me, I know John had Marion Small as well, was another really influential person or math educator for him as well with her open questions. And when we hit that point, I was hyper focused on curiosity and I was getting, I would say, pretty good at the curiosity. There was still big gaps there. There was still like the lesson flops where you're like in your mind, this is going to be awesome. You go and it's like crickets and you're like, how come? Like I did the video, right? And that's, John referenced it already. Is it really just about a video? No, because I've walked out of a movie theater before. So it's not about just a video. There's other elements that have to be going on there. And our English friends would definitely know, like when you're talking about a story, like we have to craft and script our math lessons like that story and take those students on that hero's journey, like John has mentioned. So we were getting better at that, still had big gaps along the way. But then once we got past that, sort of the interesting question, the provocation, that curiosity, it was like we flipped a switch and then we went back to teaching kids procedurally again. Mm-hmm. So it was like almost like kids knew. They're like, well, if we just wait this out, Mr. Pearce is going to finally just tell us what to do. Right. And then we'll be back to the way things used to be. And a lot of kids would, to be honest, especially kids who have done well in that system. So I'm picturing myself as a student. I would be that kid who would be like, I would much rather just sit back and you just tell me what I need to memorize. Like,
can I just take easier. Notes? Can we just take notes? I want to just take notes.
Totally. And that's really hard on teachers, right?
Oh.
Like teachers who want to change their thinking, they're trying hard and kids are begging for them to stop. And that's where a lot of teachers will they'll say, I guess, they don't like this. But then we'd get to this place where I would then teach them procedurally again. And what we realized is that we were missing the sense-making part of mathematics.
That's awesome. Speaking of that, I've done completing the square and we've taught them that. And then I said, hey, what if it was just ax squared plus bx plus c, and we don't have that? Now we understand the recipe for completing the square, so let's do this. And then all of a sudden we come up with the quadratic formula comes out of that. And then you can kind of like tie those two things together and make numbers sense and go, oh, look at this. And
it's the same.
Right. It's like, I'm like, yes, see this formula? Someone was playing around with this thing, and they said, how can I get x by itself? Because that's, that is one of the things we love to do is get x by itself. And they try, what if I use this with this? And then I'm like, and do that. And so, it's tough because sometimes that recipe is always there, and it's there, and the kids inherently know that it's there, and it is easy to default to that. And also, the pressure of time and the test and everything else. It's like, oh my God, we did all this and we didn't even get to covering the quote unquote standard that was for today because we got lost in the weeds over here, which is actually a good thing and, good for the kids. But one of the things, like I said, I've listened to you guys, I don't know, maybe I've listened to like 15 episodes. I listen to you guys and your guys' excitement and your guys' experiences and whoever the guests would be on the guests that you would have on, which is various teachers. And sometimes it's experts like you're talking about Dan Meyer, but you guys now are the Dan Meyer to other people. There's other people that are going, I learned this from the Making Math Moments Matter guy, or they might say your names directly, but anyway, the spiraling, and I'm just going to kind of give like a 2-minute elevator pitch of the spiraling, which English we've talked Tudisco. You get to do things a lot differently because you can cover all your standards in one lesson because it's a lot of things tied together.
I agree, we are the best.
Right. But history and science and math are very often broke up into these units. But instead, with spiraling, what you do is take the units and introduce each one in the first 5 to 9 days, and to get the foundation of that and spark that curiosity about that unit and get them feeling comfortable with it, and then come back to the initial unit 8 days later and go, okay, now we're going to build on what we learn. We might tie in a little bit from this other unit here because we want to make those connections. And basically we go through each unit and we go around and around and around, coming back and forth, and then interspersing and connecting and doing all that kind of stuff. And it was, for me as a teacher, and I believe that most of my kids, really, really awesome this year. They have seen the breadth of the course.
They've got the big ideas.
Right, and it's really, really cool. So
awesome.
I just want to kind of give you guys props on that, and I'll definitely put links to that.
Yeah, Kyle's got a 3-part email series on how to spiral your math class on tappintominds.com, and when you sign up to that, each day you get a video about how to do that, and he answers lots of big questions. And the theory behind it really comes from learning theory, and the idea that most math we do is massed practice. We learn one thing really fast and then we move on, and it gives the illusion that the kids know the material, and it's not until after time goes on that you can actually test to see if it's sunk in. And there's a couple books that we read about that. One was I think it's How We Learn. Kyle, is that the correct title? Benedict Carey, I think. Yeah, and the second one that we got a lot of value of is make it stick, I think, and it goes into the learning behind that. But we've actually built these ideas in our classes off a teacher from Ottawa who we highly respect, Al Overwick, who kind of jumped into this. But he did that, but he also did something that we also did in our class. What Al advocates is that you should teach through problems, and that's kind of what we're doing with our framework and spiraling kind of put together. It's how can we put problems in front of kids so that they're problem solving, and bring out the math. And Al has a really great phrase that says that, most of the time we think about covering curriculum or covering standards, and he says that what he does in his class is uncover curriculum or uncover standards. And
that's nice. I like that.
Yeah, it's great because it's a nice phrase to just say, hey, am I covering it, or am I like starting with problems and pulling the math from it that just emerges?
Yeah. Want to make sure Jimmy Pye gets in there because I know he works closely with Al as well. So two great educators to follow online.
Yeah, they do some great sessions at conferences.
I have this basically. I'm just going to play devil's advocate just for a quick moment. So you guys say, you want to make it more engaging, really pull the kids in and make them really curious. But devil's advocate for a second, why? Like, why can't I just give them a worksheet? Why can't we just work? I mean, the textbook's there. Why can't I just say, open to page 371?
You could.
And I think it's a great question because I think fundamentally a lot of people too, like when we get a little bit of pushback, when we get a little bit of that, that devil's advocate, we never want teachers, I shouldn't say never, because I think at some point some teachers may have interpreted what we're saying is that they ditch everything they're doing, and we now are very, very, very explicit about that. We actually ran a workshop or an online webinar recently where we were talking about transforming your textbook into curious problems kids want to solve. And what we're saying is it's the approach that we're looking at. We're not saying ditch a textbook. I know that there's, a book ditch the textbook. And I know that, there's all these kind of things out there. Even people now, I feel like the word worksheet or handout is like, not allowed. Like, if
it's an activity.
Yes.
My principal told me that years ago. You're not doing a worksheet. You're doing an activity. I'm like, okay. Well, I'm not a garbage man. I'm a sanitation engineer. I appreciate that.
Exactly.
I'm not a teacher. I'm an educator. Like, okay, good for you.
Exactly. And it all comes down to intentionality. And I think a lot of teachers actually put themselves in a bad spot when they take everything they've ever done, especially like picture a 15-year teacher. They maybe they're sitting listening right now and they're like, oh my gosh, I'm exactly the person that Kyle and John described of, creating the binders and doing all those things. Like, let's be honest, if you haven't done that ever in your life, you're probably all over the place and have no idea what's going on. It's almost like you have to at least get to a point of having organization, understanding the course you're teaching and all of those things. Like a first-year teacher, I'm never advocating for them to spiral because I'm like, you don't even understand what it's going to look like, yet teaching kids. Right. How long is this going to take? So I'm like, no, maybe hang on to that for now. Let's get started. But how could I give kids an experience first? And then based on what the kids do, that informs us, and that actually brings up our third part of the framework, which is igniting teacher moves. This is the part that I think is probably the most art-like of the framework, where it's a craft. You have to practice it. You'll never be perfect at it. You'll always have some lessons that don't necessarily go the way you want, but it's about anticipating what kids will do when you put them in this productive struggle. So I want to make sure that, Tudisco, I take you on a path during my lesson so that you have an experience, and then based on what you do, how you handle the problem, that's going to help influence my part, where I now bring it all together and make those connections, and I start consolidating the learning. So right now during remote learning, there's a lot of teachers that are like, how do I do this? And John and I are trying to help teachers with trying to do what we're discussing today. It's definitely easier to do face-to-face, but it's still very difficult if your experience in a math class is coming in, getting a note, and then doing a bunch of questions, practice questions. So we're not advocating that kids don't do purposeful practice. Notice how I put a spin on there, purposeful practice. So it's not about throwing out things. It's about rearranging things and maybe trying to get kids to be more like that chef instead of more like that cook.
I'll just add something onto that too, to address the why. Is if you think about every time we talk to a non-educator about math education, 2/3 of people are hating this, right? It's like, I hated math class. And
even the ones who said they were good at it, they were like, it wasn't my favorite class, but I was still pretty good at it.
Math gets a bad rap, right? Movies put in math things when they want school to look hard. It's like, we're gonna throw in the word trigonometry in here because we want this to be hard.
I can't even pronounce it.
Right.
And
the meme with all the GIF with all the formulas going around the pyramid and all that kind of stuff.
Exactly.
Right?
Like there's so many bad math experiences and that people have, and one of the things of why we've named the podcast "Making Math Moments That Matter" is partly we want to change that, right? Like, I don't want a society anymore that says math is the evil and we hated math and we wear that as a badge of pride, like, oh, I was bad at math. That's I'm proud of that. Like, you don't say you're bad at reading.
Silly.
Yeah. And so when we say, like, why change, like, we would run workshops and there would be very traditional math teachers like, why change? I'm like, well, how is it working for you right now? Like, are kids liking math? Are they hating it? Like, what are we really doing here? And that's one of our big goals is we want to change math instruction so that people do not have negative math experiences, but we also want to change them so that the kids understand and can be those chefs. So I think these are some big kind of ideas that Kyle and I always kind of think about as we design things and help our teachers.
But also, I think fundamentally one of the hardest parts in having that shift is that we, as the teacher, John and I, had to accept the fact that we weren't as good at math as we thought we were. Right? Let that sink in for a second.
Professor was
math
right.
Teachers listening. My professor was 100% accurate, and didn't hit me until like 10 years into teaching when all this started happening, and I started to realize, I'm like, I am teaching kids how to do stuff that I don't actually understand. So, like, imagine how would that go? And I'm going to use hockey because we're from Canada, but, in the US, let's say football, you have a football coach and, your football coach understands all the plays. Like, he has all the plays memorized, but he has no idea. He doesn't understand why the plays work. Right. He doesn't understand when you would use the plays. And for me as a teacher, I didn't have that ability. I didn't have the chef ability to be able to take those different recipes and put them together and deal with something when something goes wrong. How do I help that student without robbing them of their thinking and saying, nah, don't do it that way. I did that for years. Don't do it that way. That's going to take you on a crazy path. Now I realize, I'm like, kids have to go down that path. They have to go and explore and realize that, like, oh yeah, that isn't going to work very well for me. Where do I want to go back to pivot back and try to get on course here and get closer to that answer, that open middle sort of experience. But if I don't understand the math, then this is very difficult to do. So unless I'm willing to accept that and say, maybe I don't know as much as I know, and that means my ego is going to take a huge hit, my pride is going to take a huge hit, I need to have that before I can start to kind of move away from that traditional approach.
I do have a question that I've always wanted to ask math teachers.
Okay.
I once read a blog, so you know it's true, where the guy wrote about what he called the Futon Theory. And basically he said that he was moving a futon once, and a piece fell out. Like, they heard a piece fall down the stairs, but they couldn't find it. Mm-hmm. And then after that, basically the futon worked for a little while, but eventually it just kind of broke down. And he said, this is kind of how math works. This is his theory. He's like, this is kind of how math works, because like as you go along, eventually you lose a piece, and that's why at some point you just kind of hit a peak of how much math you can learn or understand because you lost a piece along the way. So
very interesting analogy.
That is really strange. And by the way, I have no idea why, but it just occurred to me that futon actually sounds like it could be part of an atom, but it isn't. I know there's neutrons and electrons, but are the photons somehow in the atom? Because it feels like
a science teacher when you need them.
We should have a futon in the atom. I think that'd be awesome. I'd love to see a kid write down futon as their answer for, if you've got this many protons, then you need to have...
How many futons?
How many futons do you have?
A cheap, uncomfortable couch that just rotates around a neutron.
Yes.
So what happens there? Like, is there a point where, like, we hit a peak in mathematics where we just can't learn anymore? Or,
I don't know if I'm going to...
along the way?
I don't know if I'm going to agree with these guys, if these guys are going to agree with me or not, because I know you guys are like, and I think the growth mindset is like, there's a truth to it, and then there's a pie in the sky idealism to it that I think sometimes can not be true. And I think people hit what I call a math wall. And the analogy I use is, like, I don't care how good a coach you are. I'm not going to get a little person to be able to dunk a basketball. No matter how much I growth mindset them, and no matter how much I, encourage them, and whatever else I can do, I can get them where they can jump higher. I can get them where they're closer to dunking, but they can't ever dunk.
Yeah. That's an interesting way to think about it. Whereas you're equating a physical capability with something that's a mental capability. Mm-hmm. So I don't know about all of that. I know that there's some truth in the futon thing, and I know that there's some truth in the wall, right? So like kids will hit a wall. People hit a wall for sure, and I think it's exactly what Tudisco has said in the sense that something fell out along the way a long time ago, and it's really hard to get that back. I would say it's not impossible to get that back, whereas it'd be almost impossible to dunk the basketball in your situation. Whereas, right. And I think that's part of what we try to do early on in the sense of building sense making with our students, is that we're trying to eliminate the futon piece from falling out. We're trying to say, like, let's build sense making early, so that we have the building blocks and the ways to make connections, so that it's less likely that those pieces are going to fall out along the way. And I know that it's going to be true. Like there are going to be kids that have pieces fall out along the way. It's just how it's going to work. Right. And we're just trying to reduce that. And so if you have a piece fall out along the way, I'm not going to say you can't fix that or you can't put it back in, but I think it's really, really hard to put it back in later versus earlier.
And I also think too, there's kind of a couple things there. Like I definitely agree, similar to the physical, scenario. If there's a mental disability, if there's, all of those things definitely factor in. But I think fundamentally, one of the hardest challenges for us as math teachers in trying to help is that if we're teaching procedurally, those pieces we're talking about are very different pieces. Where if we're learning conceptually, pieces can fall out, and that happens over time just with retention, for example. Like, I forget, but if I have conceptual understanding, and if that's how I know math works, then I can go back and I can try to retrace my steps. I always use the example of the analogy of driving to work. Like if the road is closed and I only understand how to get to work procedurally, that one piece out of my puzzle shuts me down for the day. I've got to turn back home and I got to go. But if I understand the neighborhood, if I understand the area and I can problem solve, I can now find a different route to get me to work. I definitely believe that teaching conceptually will help be the equalizer, the great equalizer, and help bring equity to mathematics.
Yeah. So this is the part where we like to hear funny stories. So I want to hear from you guys. It can be something that happened in the classroom that we tried to do I tried to spark curiosity and it went sideways this way, or we were having a seminar and it just got really ugly and this happened, or something that when I'm sure you've been teaching a good while, you've got these like go-to stories when you're at a party or whatever that you tell and just crack people up about, because the kids in the classroom do stuff and say stuff that is hysterical almost every single day.
Yeah, for sure. And I think
I know John's. I already know. I think
in the I think there's lots of fail stories in the classroom for sure, especially around trying to spark curiosity, because that's how you're going to learn. It's you're going to try to do something and then it's going to fail the first time, the second time, but you will get better at it. But something that has always come to my mind. This is back when I first started teaching, and I was that teacher that it was my way or the highway, and I was a very traditional teacher. And I was teaching a class of like a very disruptive kind of class. And a kid came up to me while we were doing an activity, and it was near the end of class, and he said, someone stole my cell phone off my desk. And I said, oh. And then I had this thought. I'm like, no one should be stealing anything in their classroom. And so I was like, ugh. And I closed the door, and the bell was just about to ring. And I said, no one's leaving this room until that cell phone comes back. So the bell rings, and the kids don't go anywhere. And one kid stands up, and he's like, I'm not sticking around here for this. I gotta go. It's lunchtime, right? So they want to get out of there. And I said, nope, no one's going anywhere. And this kid, he turns to the window, he opens the window, he hops out.
Oh, nice.
He just goes out. And I was like, oh my, I remember being really angry at the time. But I look back, it's pretty funny, and I'm like, he just left, and then two other kids followed him, jumped out the window.
Oh my God!
See, and what happens is you taught them creative thinking skills.
Yeah,
yes.
And I was like,
look at the situation.
That is problem solving.
And another kid turns to me and says, Mr. Orr, can we go? And I'm like, no. And he's like, we're not going anywhere until that cell phone's returned. And another kid turns to me, because I didn't realize it. Another kid turns to me, he's like, what happens if it was the guy that jumped out the window?
Right.
So then I was like, you're right, and it probably was
I got
him.
A pickle.
So I let everybody go, and the admin vice principals, they looked into it. It was the kid who jumped out the window that did steal the cell phone.
Oh my God, that's hysterical.
So that's I don't think, Kyle, that's the one you were thinking of, but
no.
What do you got?
Well, as soon as they
that's
said about
stuff.
when with sparking curiosity, I thought you were going to share right away, because you share it sometimes when we present. We always talk about those inappropriate comments when we do a notice and wonder, and students bring up things that are unrelated or maybe even inappropriate things. And the one time, John's playing this video for the first time, and it's him creating. It's called the R2D2 problem, and he's using sticky notes similar to Andrew Stadell's file cabinet sticky note problem, and he's making this piece of art that's going to end up being R2D2. And he asked them, what do you notice or wonder? And the one student said, I noticed your underwear, because it's like paws and his underwear is showing. Right? So,
you can see like the top of my underwear sticking out of my pants at the paws.
Oh, that's good stuff.
That was funny.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. For me, when it comes to sparking curiosity, I don't remember any definitely fails, but they weren't funny fails. They were actually kind of made you feel not so great, because, I was missing certain pieces. Mm-hmm. Or I just, I didn't leave it open enough for students to share what they really noticed and wondered. But John's story reminded me, and I wasn't going to mention this, but one time a student fell asleep in my class, and it was a grade 12 class. We were having, a good kid too, we had a good relationship. So, it wasn't like we were picking on the student or anything. And I went to my classmate, my colleague who's next door, and he's a real prankster. His name's Dave. And I said, hey, I'm like, so-and-so's sleeping over here. And he goes, get your whole class out and go into the courtyard and then page the office and have the office page into the classroom. So that was our move there. Wow. So we had the whole class staring outside in the courtyard looking in, and we called to the office and said, hey, page for so-and-so. I feel horrible. I can't even remember his name. I have his face right in my mind.
That's okay. We just say George around here.
They paged in, and the look on the student's face when he woke up, and he panicked. He's looking around. Everybody's gone. He's like, "What time is it?" Oh, it was great. The whole class is laughing. We had a good time with that one.
Yes, I knew a fellow teacher, and we say often, don't try this at home. But so a kid fell asleep in class. He took Scotch tape and Scotch taped the kid to his desk. I mean, he used a whole roll. I wish I had a picture of it. You got to be
in a deep sleep to get,
right. That, and I guess maybe he'd knocked on the desk. The old we all know the knock on the desk trick to get the kids awake. So I guess he had tried that, and the kid was just completely out. I don't know what the situation. The kid was sick. The kid was chemically enhanced.
I was going to say the next move I think is check the pulse.
And just take the Scotch tape. Oh, I'll tell another one. Wow. This is a good story, just because I have all these funny stories in my head that I don't. You're sparking funny stories. So, the same actual teacher, when he was out, told me this story. And substitute teacher, and I don't know about you guys up there, but a lot of our substitute teachers are older. Maybe it's somebody who's retired from teaching. Maybe it's someone who's retired from whatever, and they're just looking for a little part-time job and something to do. Mm-hmm. So the teacher falls asleep. The substitute teacher falls asleep. By the way, this same substitute fell asleep when I was home sick and during giving my midterm. My kids did so good on that midterm. But but there's the kid showed video of the teacher the next day. So the substitute falls asleep. He's this guy. He's 70 years old. He has no teeth, so that adds to the thing. So the kids took sharpened pencils and threw them into the ceiling. You know how you can get the ceiling, the pencils to stick into the drop ceiling, all above his head. So then the guy's there lying asleep and they're videoing him, and the pencils, they only stay there so long, and they work their way out and they hit the guy. So the guy is asleep, snoring, and then you see him when the pencil hits him, and you're, what? And then he kind of looks around, and then right back to sleep.
Bold.
Wow.
Yeah, that's, children will be children, and adults, I guess, will be adults, because we still find that funny.
Wow. Yes, it's just good stuff. There's so much fun stuff. Okay, well,
for sure.
We really appreciate having you guys on. It has been an absolute blast, and I hope that people out there listening appreciate it. And we've sparked some curiosity to find out stuff about you, and they will be looking you up and finding out more of your stuff, and we'll continue to promote you guys. So
you guys definitely given me a lot to think about. So if people want to find you too online, where can they find you?
Probably the best place right now is to head to makemathmoments.com, which is where you can find the podcast. You can find our information about our workshops, our online workshops, and we have a virtual summit that we run every year, so an online virtual conference that's free for everybody. So you can find info about all of our stuff at makemathmoments.com. That's kind of like our main hub, and then I think we can you can branch off to get our other sites, which are tapintoteamminds.com. That's Kyle's kind of blog, plus lots of resources. And then my site, which is mr.or-isageek.com. So those are 3 sites. Kyle, you want to add anything in there? Twitter?
No, I think that's probably your home base, like John said. Right now, we also have a teacher due to the COVID situation. We've got a lot of teachers looking for extra PD. So we've got a teacher license free for folks to access the academy if they want to check that out. Makemathmoments.com/trial. And we'll be chatting with more math moment makers in the community area.
Awesome.
Great.
Awesome. And do you guys have the high five sound effect? Can you push a button and play it, or do we have to
we do it every time?
It's a real clap.
We do
a real clap every time.
Oh, is it? So it's not a button you push or something that you add in?
No, Kyle claps every time.
Okay, so to this guy, like I said, listen to one that we say thank you and stay unprofessional. That's kind of our closing. But you guys do your little closing thing for us.
All right, go ahead, Kyle.
All right. Well, that's it for us. I'm Kyle Pearce.
And I'm John Orr.
High fives for us.
And high fives for you.
Love it. We didn't get the last one.
Love it. Thanks, guys. Thanks for having us.
Thanks. Well, it was awesome. Appreciate you guys. All right. Thanks. Thank you so much. That concludes today's episode. We appreciate you listening all the way through. So if you've listened this far, you obviously are either tied up in a room or you really liked what you were hearing. So please share this podcast with your friends, with your neighbors, on your social media. Please click subscribe if you are listening to it on some type of app where you can subscribe. Also, please follow us on Twitter, Unprocast. We are at Unprocast now on Twitter, so you'll get episode information and random stuff. Also, if you want to email us at at unprofessionaldevelopmentcast@gmail. Alrighty. And I really want to have a big shout out. We now have listeners in Great Britain and in India. We are international, baby. So I just want to let them know that we know that they're listening and want to let them know that we appreciate that. We're going global, baby. Look out, Joe Rogan. Thank you.